Every time I came home from base, something felt wrong in my house. Not wrong in a way I could point to immediately. Not moved furniture or broken locks or anything that would register on a checklist. Wrong in the specific, trained way that things feel wrong to someone who has spent 12 years learning to read environments. The way a room feels when it has been used recently. The surfaces look when they have been touched and replaced rather than simply left. The particular quality of a house that has had people in it who should not have been there. I am a United States Army officer. I have been stationed 40 minutes from our home for 3 years, which means I come home on weekends and on leave and on the occasional weekday when my schedule allows. I am good at reading environments. It is not instinct, it is training, practiced and refined over 12 years in conditions that made accuracy a survival requirement. My husband said I was paranoid. He said it the first time I mentioned it, 6 months after we moved into the house, gently and with the specific patience of someone managing a person they believe has a problem. He said the Army had trained me to see threats everywhere and that home was not a combat environment and that I needed to learn to turn it off. He said it the second time with slightly less patience. The third time, he said it with the particular tiredness of someone who has had this conversation too many times and has decided it is a character flaw rather than an observation. I stopped mentioning it. I did not stop noticing. I want to tell you what I noticed because the details matter and because they are the kind of details that only someone trained to notice them would have caught. The kitchen chairs were sometimes at slightly different angles than I had left them. Not dramatically, a degree, 2 degrees, the kind of difference that the eye passes over and the trained mind catches. I began leaving them at specific angles before I left for base on Sunday evenings and checking them when I returned on Friday nights. The angle was consistently different every Friday. The basement door, which we used rarely, which I kept closed and which had a small piece of tape I had placed at the hinge line, a habit from training, was displaced on 4 separate occasions over 3 months. Not removed, displaced and replaced by someone who had noticed it but had not replaced it with the precision required to fool someone who had placed it. The backyard gate latch was worn in a new pattern. I noticed this because I am someone who notices latch wear. The wear pattern indicated the gate had been opened and closed significantly more often than our household habits accounted for. I documented all of it. Dates, times, photographs, precise measurements where I could take them. Not because I had a theory yet. I did not have a theory, I had observations. I was doing what I had been trained to do, collect data before drawing conclusions. Ryan did not know I was documenting. I had stopped telling Ryan what I noticed, and I had, as a consequence, not told him I had started writing it down. This turned out to be the most important decision I made in 18 months. The documentation became a file. Over 18 months of weekend returns and leave periods, I had compiled a record that was, in the language of the training I had received, thorough. Photographic evidence, written logs with timestamps, measurements, patterns, the specific accumulated evidence of a house being used regularly in ways that its resident husband, on his own, could not account for. I had also, at month 14, done something that Ryan did not know about and that I had decided to do after a specific Friday evening when I came home and found something I could not explain away. I had found a residue on the basement floor, a specific kind of residue that I recognized from training in a way that I will not detail here because the detail is not mine to put into a public story. What I will tell you is that I recognized it, and that recognizing it told me that whatever was happening in my house when I was not there was not something that could be filed under Ryan being careless about the kitchen chairs. I took a sample, I photographed it, I packaged it correctly, which I knew how to do, and I sent it to a contact I had, a former colleague, now in a federal position, with a message that said simply, "I need to know what this is. No questions yet." She came back to me in 4 days. She said, "Where did you find this?" I said, "My basement." There was a pause. She said, "Don't touch anything else. Don't tell your husband. Call me tomorrow morning." I did not tell Ryan. I want to be precise about how that felt because I think honesty requires it. Ryan and I had been married for 7 years. We had a daughter, Emma, who was 5, and who called her father Daddy with the complete, uncomplicated trust of a 5-year-old who has no reason not to. We had a house and a life and 7 years of shared history and the specific accumulated weight of a marriage that had, for most of those years, been something I had believed in. I did not tell him because I did not know yet what I was dealing with, because the trained part of me understood that what I knew at that point was not sufficient, and that acting on insufficient information was the fastest way to compromise a situation that might require handling correctly. I went home that Friday, and I made dinner, and I put Emma to bed, and I sat on the couch with Ryan and watched television, and I was, as I had learned to be over 18 months, entirely ordinary. Inside, I was building a file that was about to become relevant in ways I had not yet fully understood.
The two men came on a Tuesday morning. I was home, a rare weekday, Emma at school, Ryan at work, or at what I believed was work. I had begun, in the previous 4 weeks, to have a different understanding of how Ryan's schedule actually functioned, based on information my contact had been quietly developing. The knock was professional, firm, measured, the knock of people who do this regularly and who have learned the exact force that communicates authority without aggression. I opened the door. 2 men in suits. Badges that I looked at carefully and verified, because I am someone who verifies badges. Federal agents. The taller one said my name, my rank. He said, "We'd like to speak with you. May we come in?" I said, "Yes." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had noted the angles of the chairs for 18 months, the same kitchen where Ryan had told me I was paranoid for the first time, with patience, managing me. The agent said, "We want to ask you about activity at this address over the past 2 years. I said, "I have a file." Both of them looked at me. I said, 18 months of documentation, photographs, logs, measurements, a residue sample I submitted through a contact 4 weeks ago. I'll get it." I got it. I am going to tell you what was in their file and what was in mine, and where they intersected, because the intersection is the point of this story. Their file contained evidence that my home had been used on approximately 40 separate occasions over 22 months as a meeting point for a network that I will describe only as something that federal agencies take very seriously. Ryan was not the primary figure in this network. He was, in the language the agents used, a facilitator, a person who provided a location, access, and logistical support in exchange for financial compensation that had been going into an account I had not known about. My file contained 18 months of evidence that something was happening in my home: the chair angles, the tape on the basement door, the gate latch wear, the residue, the photographs and the timestamps and the written logs. Their file and my file, laid on my kitchen table that Tuesday morning, told the same story from different angles. The taller agent looked at my documentation for a long time. Then he said, "Captain, this is thorough." I said, "I was told I was paranoid." He said, "You were not paranoid." I said, "I know."
What followed was a process I cannot detail in full for reasons that should be clear. What I can tell you is that my documentation was entered into the federal case, that it corroborated evidence the agencies had been building from the outside, that the 18 months I had spent writing down chair angles and measuring latch wear and taking residue samples turned out to be, in the assessment of the agents who reviewed it, significant. Ryan was arrested 6 weeks after the Tuesday morning. Not at our house. I had been moved with Emma to a location the agency arranged, which I accepted because keeping Emma safe was the first and only priority that mattered. Emma asked where Daddy was. I told her he had to go away for a while. She accepted this with the resilience of a 5-year-old who does not yet understand permanence. I held her, and I thought about the kitchen chairs and the 18 months and the specific exhausting discipline of noticing and documenting and saying nothing while being told I was imagining things. I was not imagining things. I had never been imagining things. The public moment came at the preliminary hearing. I had not planned to attend. My attorney had advised that my presence was not required, and that there were reasons, given my military position and the sensitivity of the case, to maintain some distance from the public proceedings. I attended anyway. I sat in the third row. Ryan saw me when he was brought in. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has spent months constructing a version of events in which he is the central figure and who has just understood from the third row that the version is not going to hold. His attorney argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the documentation was a product of an obsessive surveillance conducted by a spouse who had been told she was paranoid and had written everything down anyway. The prosecutor introduced my file. 18 months of documentation, 47 photographs, 32 dated log entries, 1 residue sample with federal laboratory analysis, the precise, methodical record of a person who had been told she was paranoid and had written everything down anyway. The judge looked at it for a long time. Ryan's attorney stopped arguing that it was circumstantial. I sat in the third row, and I looked at the table where the file was, and I thought about the first time Ryan had said paranoid, gently, with patience, managing me, and the second time, and the third. I thought about the kitchen chairs. I thought about what it costs to trust yourself when the person who is supposed to know you best is telling you not to. And I thought about Emma, at school, drawing pictures of our dog and bringing them home to me. I had protected her. That was what mattered. That was the only thing that had ever mattered.
I am still serving. I want to tell you that because I think it matters. The case, the process, the 18 months before it and the months since, none of it has ended my career. If anything, and I say this with the specific earned certainty of someone who has lived it, it has clarified it. I know what I am for. I know what the training is for. Not just for the obvious applications, the deployments, the operational environments, the things people think of when they think of military service, but for this, for the kitchen table on a Friday night, for the chair angles and the tape and the latchware and residue samples and the specific grinding discipline of trusting yourself when someone you trusted was telling you not to. For the Tuesday morning when 2 men knocked and I said, I have a file, and went to get it. Emma is 6 now. She has, in the past several months, begun to understand more than a 5-year-old can understand, in the way that children understand things. Not completely, not with the full weight of it, but in the outline. I answer her questions honestly at the level her age allows, because I do not believe in hiding things from the people you are responsible for protecting. She asked me once why I write things down all the time. I said, because writing things down means you don't have to rely on anyone else to remember them correctly. She thought about that. Then she got a notebook and started writing things down too. I want to say something to every woman who has been told she is paranoid in her own home. You are not paranoid. The feeling that something is wrong is information. Your body and your mind are collecting data that your conscious understanding has not yet assembled into a complete picture. That is not paranoia. That is perception. That is the thing that 12 years of training refined in me, but that exists in every person who has learned, through whatever means their life has provided, to pay attention. Trust the feeling. Document what you find. Do not confront until you have enough. And when the 2 men come and show you their badges and ask what you know, have your file ready. She doesn't stay silent. She doesn't stay broken. She rises. Sometimes rising is 18 months of chair angles and tape and latchware and residue samples and the specific grinding discipline of trusting yourself when someone you trusted was telling you not to. Sometimes rising is sitting in the third row and watching your documentation laid on a table in a federal hearing room. Sometimes rising is going home to a 6-year-old with a notebook. She rises. Subscribe. New story every week, and every single one of them ends the same way. She rises. Leave a comment. Have you ever been told you were imagining something and found out you were completely right? I read every single one.